The Cree Woman, a mystery of... The bitter wind howled across the frozen expanse of northern Saskatchewan as photographer Thomas Whitmore adjusted his heavy camera equipment with numb fingers. It was February 1898, and he had been commissioned by the Canadian Pacific Railway to document the harsh winter conditions that plagued their northern roads. What he captured that day would haunt him for the rest of his life. Through the swirling snow, Whitmore first saw her as a distant figure moving against the white landscape. Even from afar, there was something extraordinary about the way she moved. Purposeful, graceful, seemingly unaffected by the brutal blizzard that had been raging for 3 days. As he drew closer, he could see she was a Cree woman, her traditional clothing a stark contrast against the endless white of the prairie. But it wasn't just her presence that captured his attention. Behind her, following in her footsteps through the deep snow, was a line of children. They moved with the same determined grace, their small forms bundled in whatever warm clothing they could find. The woman looked back frequently, ensuring none of the children fell behind, her voice carrying words of encouragement that were lost in the wind, but whose meaning was clear in her gestures. Whitmore quickly set up his camera, his photographer's instincts overriding his confusion about what he was witnessing. The glass plate captured the scene in perfect detail. The woman's radiant face turned toward the children, her traditional beaded clothing and fur-lined parka, the way the falling snow seemed to frame her like a halo. Her beauty was striking, but it was more than physical. There was an inner light that seemed to emanate from her, visible even in the harsh conditions. Extraordinary, Whitmore muttered to himself as he prepared another plate. The woman appeared to be leading the children somewhere specific, though in the whiteout conditions, he couldn't imagine where they might be going. The nearest settlement was Fort Carlton, still 20 miles to the south, and no one in their right mind would be traveling in such weather. As he watched through his viewfinder, preparing for a second shot, something remarkably happened. The woman turned directly toward his position, as if she had sensed his presence despite the distance and the storm. For a moment their eyes met across the frozen landscape, and Whitmore felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Her gaze was intense, knowing, and somehow ancient, as if she could see not just him, but through him to something beyond. She raised her hand in what might have been a greeting or a blessing, and then turned back to the children. Whitmore managed to capture this moment as well. The image showing her hand raised against the storm, her face turned toward his camera with an expression of serene determination. When he looked up from his camera again, they were gone. Whitmore blinked, certain that the blowing snow was playing tricks on his vision. He had been watching them just moments before, and there was nowhere they could have disappeared to so quickly. The landscape was flat and open, with no shelter or cover for miles. Yet the woman and children had vanished as completely as if they had never been there at all. Shaken, Whitmore packed his equipment and made his way back to the railway camp, where he was staying. The other men, surveyors, engineers, and laborers working on the northern expansion, listened to his story with a mixture of skepticism and unease. "You sure you weren't seeing things, Tom?" asked James Morrison, the camp foreman. "This cold can play tricks on a man's mind, make you see things that aren't there." But when Whitmore developed his photographs the next day in his makeshift darkroom, the images were clear and undeniable. The woman was there leading the children through the storm, her beauty radiant against the harsh landscape. Every detail was perfect. The intricate beadwork on her clothing, the determined expressions on the children's faces, the way the snow seemed to swirl around them without obscuring their forms. "I'll be damned," Morrison whispered as he examined the photographs. "Who is she? And where did those children come from?" Whitmore had been wondering the same thing. He made inquiries among the local Cree bands, showing the photographs to anyone who would look. The reactions were always the same: a sharp intake of breath, a step backward, and then hurried words in Cree that he couldn't understand. Finally, an elderly Cree man named Joseph Birdie agreed to speak with him. Birdie examined the photographs for a long time, his weathered face grave. "You should not have taken these pictures," Verdi said, finally, his English heavily accented but clear. "This woman, she walks between worlds. She comes when children are in danger, when they need to be led to safety. But where did she take them?" Whitmore asked. "And where did they come from?" Beerby shook his head. "That is not for us to know. She appears when she is needed, and then she returns to the spirit world. My grandmother told me stories of such a woman, and her grandmother before her. She has been seen for many generations, always the same, always beautiful, always leading children to safety." Whitmore felt a chill run down his spine. "You're saying she's some kind of spirit?" "I am saying she is more than what your camera can capture," Berry replied. "And you should be careful taking her picture. It may have consequences." That night, Whitmore lay in his bunk, staring at the photographs by lamplight. The woman's face seemed to glow with an inner radiance that defied explanation. Her eyes, even in the black and white image, seemed alive, watching him with that same knowing gaze he had encountered across the frozen prairie. He decided to return to the same location the next day, hoping to see her again and perhaps solve the mystery of who she was and where she had taken the children. But when morning came, the storm had intensified, and the other men in the camp refused to let him venture out alone. It would be 3 days before the weather cleared enough for travel, and by then, any tracks the woman and children might have left would be long buried under fresh snow. But Whitmore was determined to find answers. They had captured something extraordinary on film, something that challenged everything he thought he knew about the world. What he didn't know was that his photographs would soon attract attention from far beyond the railway camp, and that the mystery of the Cree woman was just beginning to unfold. Dr. Margaret Sinclair adjusted her wide-rimmed spectacles as she examined the photographs spread across her desk at the University of Toronto's Department of Anthropology. The images had been sent to her by Thomas Whitmore, along with a detailed letter describing his encounter in the Saskatchewan wilderness. As one of Canada's leading experts on Indigenous cultures, she was often consulted on unusual discoveries, but these photographs were unlike anything she had ever seen. "Remarkable," she murmured, studying the clarity and detail of the images. The woman's traditional clothing was authentic. That Sinclair could identify the specific bedwork patterns and fur preparations that were characteristic of the Plains Cree. But there was something about the photographs that troubled her, something she couldn't quite articulate. Her assistant, a young graduate student named Robert Chen, looked over her shoulder. "The technical quality is exceptional for field photography in those conditions. But Professor, look at this detail." He pointed to the woman's face in the clearest image. "There's no frost on her breath, no ice crystals on her clothing. In a blizzard at those temperatures, that should be impossible." Dr. Sinclair nodded, having noticed the same anomaly. She had spent enough time in northern Canada to know that even the most experienced travelers showed signs of the extreme cold. Yet this woman appeared completely unaffected by conditions that should have been life-threatening. "I want you to research in historical records of missing children in the Saskatchewan region during the winter of 1897, he instructed Chen. "Check with the Northwest Mounted Police, the Hudson's Bay Company, and any missionary records you can find." While Chen began his research, Sinclair decided to travel north to investigate the matter personally. She had contacts among the Cree communities, scholars and elders who might be able to shed light on the mysterious woman in the photograph. The journey to Saskatchewan took her 3 days by train, and she arrived at Fort Carleton on a crisp March morning. The fort served as a trading post and administrative center for the region, and its commander, Inspector William Davidson of the Northwest Mounted Police, had agreed to assist her investigation. "Strange business, this," Davidson said as he examined the photographs in his office. "We've had no reports of missing children in the area, but then again, communication with the remote pens can be spotted during the winter months." Dr. Sinclair had brought copies of the photographs, and she showed them to several Cree individuals who came to the fort for trading. The reactions were consistent and unsettling. Immediate recognition followed by reluctance to discuss what they had seen. Finally, she was introduced to Mary Thunderchild, an elderly Cree woman who served as an interpreter and cultural liaison. Mary examined the photographs with great care, her expression growing more serious with each image. "This is Isquitisik," Mary said, finally, using the Cree name. "The woman of the sky. My great-grandmother told me stories of her when I was a child. Tell me about these stories." Sinclair said. Taking out her notebook, Mary was quiet for a long moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. "She appears when children are lost or in danger, always during the worst storms, when death walks close. She leads them to safety, but she is not of this world.
She comes from the spirit realm, sent by the Creator to protect the innocent. But these children in the photograph, where did they come from? And where was she taking them?" Mary shook her head. "That is not for us to question. She appears when she is needed, and then she returns to the sky."
"It has been this way for many generations." Dr. Sinclair pressed for more details, but Mary would say no more. However, she did agree to introduce Dr. Sinclair to other elders, who might be willing to share their knowledge. Over the next several days, Sinclair collected fragments of his stories from various sources. The accounts were remarkably consistent. A beautiful Cree woman who appeared during blizzards to rescue lost children, always wearing traditional clothing, always radiating an otherworldly presence. Some claimed she was a spirit. Others believed she was a woman who had died saving children and now continued her work from beyond the grave. Meanwhile, Robert Chen's research in Toronto had uncovered some disturbing information. He sent a telegram to Dr. Sinclair that made her blood run cold. "Found records of missing children. Stop residential school fire. January 1898. Stop 12 children. Un account for stop believed fled into storm. Stop never found. Stop Dr. Sinclair. Immediately sought out Inspector Davison." With this new information, the records Chen had found indicated that a fire had broken out at a residential school near Battleford in late January. In the chaos of the evacuation, 12 indigenous children had disappeared into the night during one of the worst blizzards of the winter. "We searched for weeks once the weather cleared," Davidson confirmed, consulting his own records. "Found no trace of them. Assumed they had perished in the storm. Tragic business, but nothing common in those days." Dr. Sinclair felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Saskatchewan winter. "Inspector, the children in these photographs, could they be the missing students?" Davidson examined the images again, this time with new understanding. "It's possible the timing would be right, and the location." "Yes, if they had fled south from Battleford, they might have ended up in that area." But this revelation only deepened the mystery. If the woman in the photographs had indeed rescued the missing children, where had she taken them? And why had no trace of them ever been found? Sinclair decided to visit the site where Whitmore had taken the photographs. Davidson provided her with a guide, a young Cree man named Peter Beridi, the grandson of the elder who had spoken with Whitmore. The journey to the location took them across frozen prairie that seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions. When they reached the spot where Whitmore had set up his camera, Peter immediately began examining the ground, looking for any signs that might have been preserved under the snow. "Here," he said suddenly, pointing to a depression in the snow. "Tracks. All but still visible." Dr. Sinclair looked where he was pointing and could just make out the faint impressions of footprints, adult-sized leading, with smaller prints following behind. The tracks led north, toward a line of hills that broke the monotony of the prairie. They followed the tracks for several miles until they reached a small valley sheltered by stands of poplar and birch trees. In the center of the valley was a frozen pond, and near its shore, Peter made a discovery that left them both speechless. Partially buried in the snow were the remains of a temporary shelter, branches woven together and covered with hides in the traditional Cree manner. Inside the shelter, they found evidence that people had stayed there, the remains of a fire, scraps of cloth, and most significantly, small items that could only have belonged to children. They were here, Dr. Sinclair whispered, examining a small wooden toy carved in the shape of a horse. But where did they go from here? Peter was studying the ground around the shelter with intense concentration. The tracks continue, he said finally. But they are strange. They lead to the pond, but they do not come back. Sinclair felt a chill run down her spine as she looked at the frozen surface of the pond. The implications of what Peter was suggesting were too terrible to contemplate. But as they prepared to leave the valley, Peter made one final discovery that would change everything they thought they knew about the mysterious woman and the children she had led through the storm. I want to know how far this message is reaching. Comment below and tell me which city or country you're watching from. Peter Beardy knelt beside the frozen pond, brushing snow away from something that had caught his eye near the water's edge. Sinclair watched as he carefully excavated what appeared to be a piece of beaded leather, its intricate pattern still visible despite being buried in the snow for weeks. "This is not from the children," Peter said, holding up the artifact. "This is woman's work, very old style, older than my grandmother's grandmother would have made." Dr. Sinclair examined the beadwork closely. The patterns were indeed ancient, using techniques and designs that hadn't been common for at least a century. The leather itself seemed remarkably well preserved for something that had been exposed to the harsh winter conditions. "Peter, you said the tracks led to the pond, but didn't come back. Show me exactly where." Peter led her to the edge of the frozen water, where the snow had been disturbed in a pattern that suggested multiple people had gathered at this spot. The footprints, both adult and child-sized, seemed to converge at the water's edge and then simply disappear. "It makes no sense," Sinclair muttered, studying their scene. "Unless," she looked up at Peter, who was watching her with an expression that suggested he understood more than he was saying. "Your grandfather told stories about this woman, didn't he? About where she takes the children?" Peter nodded slowly. "He said she leads them to the spirit world, to a place where they will be safe forever. But I never believed. I thought they were just stories." Dr. Sinclair felt a scientific skepticism warring with the evidence before her eyes. Everything about this discovery challenged her rational understanding of the world. Yet the physical evidence was undeniable. They spent the rest of the day searching the area around the pond, but found no other clues about what had happened to the children. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the frozen landscape, they made their way back to Fort Carlton. That evening, Dr. Sinclair sat in a room at the fort's guest quarters, writing in her journal by lamplight. She was struggling to reconcile what she had found with her scientific training. The evidence suggested that the missing children had indeed been led to the valley by the mysterious woman, but their ultimate fate remained unclear. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Inspector Davison entered, carrying a telegram that had just arrived. "From your assistant in Toronto," he said, handing her the message. "Thought you'd want to see it immediately." Sinclair read the telegram with growing amazement. Additional photographs discovered. Stop Whitmore not first to capture her image. Stop found similar fotos from 1976, 1954, 1931. Stop same, woman identical. Appearance. Stop investigating further. Stop. "Good God," Dr. Sinclair whispered. "If this is true," Davison read over her shoulder. "What does it mean?" "It means that either we're dealing with an extraordinary coincidence, or this woman has been appearing for decades without aging a day." The next morning brought another surprise. Mary Thunderchild arrived at the fort, seeking out Dr. Sinclair with urgent news. "I have been thinking about your questions," Mary said. "There are things I did not tell you, things that perhaps you need to know." She led Sinclair to a quiet corner of the trading post, away from curious ears. My great-grandmother was there when Esquikisik first appeared, Mary began. It was during the great sickness, when many children were dying. A woman came from the sky, beautiful and radiant, and she took the sick children away. Those who went with her were never seen again, but neither did they suffer. When was this? Dr. Sinclair asked. Many generations ago, before the white men came to our lands. But she has appeared many times since then, always when children are in great danger. Mary paused, seeming to struggle with whether to continue. There is more. My great-grandmother said that Esquikisik was once a real woman, a Cree mother who lost her own children to sickness. She prayed to the Creator to let her save other children, and her prayer was answered. But the price was that she could never rest, never join her own children in the spirit world, until all the children who needed saving had been saved. Dr. Sinclair felt a chill run through her. And you believe this is the same woman who appeared to Mr. Whitmore? Mary nodded gravely. The photographs show her true face. She has not aged because she exists between worlds, neither fully alive nor fully dead. That afternoon, Dr. Sinclair received another telegram from Robert Chen. One contained information that made her question everything. She thought she knew about the case. Found records of children from pond locations. Stop, all 12 missing students found alive. Stop, discovered at mission school. Dos, found alive. Stop, discovered at mission school. Dos, travelet. Stop, claim beautiful woman. Led them to Saf. Tisafiti. Stop. Dr. Sinclair read the telegram 3 times before its full implications sank in. The children hadn't died, they had been saved. Summerhill, the mysterious woman, had led them across 200 miles of frozen wilderness in the middle of winter and delivered them safely to another school. But the logistics were impossible. 12 children couldn't have traveled that distance in those conditions without supplies, shelter, or transportation. Yet the records Chen had found were official documents from the mission school, signed by witnesses and corroborated by the Northwest Mounted Police. She immediately sent a return telegram requesting more details about the children's survivals and their condition when they were found. The response came the next day. Children in perfect health, despite the journey, stop, no frostbite, or malnutrition, stop school. Records escribe, arribalas miraculous, stop children, spoke of women who protected them from cold and hunger. Stop said, she glowed with inner light. Stop disappeared after delivering them. Sup. Dr. Sinclair sat back in her chair, overwhelmed by the implications of what she was learning. The evidence was pointing toward something that challenged every scientific principle she had been taught. Yet it was documented and corroborated by multiple independent sources. That evening, she made a decision that would change the course of her investigation. She would travel to the mission school where the children had been found and interview them personally. If the mysterious woman was real, if she truly had the power to save children in impossible circumstances, then Dr. Sinclair needed to understand how and why. But as she prepared for the journey, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to uncover something far more profound than a simple mystery. The woman in the photograph seemed to be watching her from the images, her radiant face holding secrets that spanned generations. And somewhere in the back of her mind, Dr. Sinclair began to wonder if her own investigation might have attracted the attention of forces beyond her understanding. The journey to St. Mary's Mission School took Dr. Sinclair through some of the most remote territory in Saskatchewan. The school was located near the shores of Lake Athabasca, serving the scattered Cree and Dene communities of the far north. When she finally arrived after 3 days of difficult travel, she was greeted by Father Michael O'Brien, an Irish priest who had been running the mission for over a decade. Dr. Sinclair, welcome, Father O'Brien said, his weathered face creased with concern. I must say, your telegram about the children has stirred up quite a bit of discussion here. What happened to them? Well, it's not something easily explained. The priest led her to his modest office, where a fire crackled in a stone hearth. The walls were lined with books and religious artifacts, but Dr. Sinclair's attention was drawn to a large cross carved from local wood that hung above the priest's desk. "Father, I need to speak with the children who arrived here in February. I'm trying to understand what happened to them during their journey." Father O'Brien's expression grew troubled. "Doctor, I should warn you the children's account of their journey is unusual. At first, we thought they were suffering from exposure, perhaps hallucinations brought on by their ordeal. But their stories have remained consistent, and their physical condition when they arrived was remarkable." "What do you mean by remarkable?" "They showed no signs of frostbite, malnutrition, or exhaustion. After traveling over 200 miles through the worst winter conditions I've seen in 20 years, they arrived here as if they had been on a pleasant walk. It defies all medical explanation." Father O'Brien arranged for Dr. Sinclair to meet with the children in the school's common room. As she waited, she reviewed her notes from the investigation, trying to prepare questions that might help her understand what had really happened. The children who entered the room ranged in age from 7 to 14. They moved with the quiet dignity that Dr. Sinclair had observed in many indigenous children who had been placed in residential schools, but there was something else in their demeanor, a sense of peace and confidence that seemed unusual given their traumatic experience. The oldest of the group was a girl named Sarah Muskrat, who appeared to be about 13. She had been chosen by the others to speak for the group, and she regarded Dr. Sinclair with intelligent, watchful eyes. "Sarah," Sinclair began gently, "I'm here to learn about your journey from the school near Battleford. Can you tell me what happened after the fire?" Sarah glanced at the other children, who nodded encouragingly. "We ran from the fire," she said in careful English. "It was very cold, and the snow was deep. We thought we would die in the storm. But you didn't die. Someone helped you." Sarah's eyes lit up with an expression that was almost reverent. "The beautiful woman came to us. She found us when we were lost and cold and afraid." "Can you describe this woman?" "She was grey, like us, but different. She wore the old clothes, with beautiful beadwork that seemed to shine even in the dark. Her face was kind, and she was not cold even though the wind was terrible." One of the younger children, a boy named Tommy Bear, spoke up suddenly. "She glowed," he said in a whisper, "like the sun was inside her." Dr. Sinclair made notes as the children continued their account. According to their testimony, the woman had appeared just as they were about to collapse from exhaustion and cold. She had spoken to them in Cree, telling them to follow her and that she would lead them to safety. "How long did you travel with her?" Dr. Sinclair asked. Sarah thought carefully. "It is hard to say. The storm was very bad, and it was always dark, but we walked for many days and nights." "Weren't you hungry? Cold? Tired?" The children exchanged glances, and Sarah shook her head. "When we were with the beautiful woman, we did not feel hunger or cold. She would touch us, and the warmth would go through our whole body. At night, she would sing to us, and we would sleep peacefully even in the snow." Dr. Sinclair felt a chill run down her spine. "What did she sing?" "Old songs," said a girl named Mary Little Wolf. "Songs our grandmothers sang, but older, songs from the time before time." "And she never left you, never disappeared?" "She was always there," Sarah confirmed, "leading us, protecting us, keeping us warm, until we reached this place." "What happened when you arrived here?" Sarah's expression grew sad. "She brought us to the edge of the mission grounds, just as the sun was rising. She told us we would be safe here, that good people would care for us. Then she kissed each of us on the forehead and said goodbye. And then she walked back into the forest, and the light around her grew brighter and brighter until she disappeared like a star going out." Sinclair looked around at all the children, seeing the same conviction in each of their faces. "Do any of you doubt what you saw? Do you think it might have been a dream or a hallucination?" The children shook their heads unanimously. Tommy Bear spoke up again. She was real. More real than anything else. She saved us. After the interview, Dr. Sinclair spoke privately with Father O'Brien about the children's condition when they arrived. Doctor, in 20 years of working with these communities, I've seen what exposure and starvation can do to children. These 12 should have been dead or dying when they reached us. Instead, they were in perfect health. Their clothes were clean and dry. They showed no signs of malnutrition, and they had a serenity about them that I've rarely seen in children who have experienced trauma. Have they shown any lasting effects from their experience? Quite the opposite. They seem more confident, more at peace with themselves. Several of the teachers have commented on their remarkable resilience and their kindness toward the other students. That evening, Sinclair sat in her guest room, trying to make sense of what she had learned. The children's account was consistent and detailed, but it described events that seemed to defy the laws of physics and biology. Yet, the physical evidence, their remarkable health, their safe arrival across impossible distances, supported their seemingly impossible story. She was interrupted by a soft knock at her door. Sarah Muskrat stood in the hallway, holding something in her hands. Dr. Sinclair, he wanted to give you this, Sarah said, holding out a small object. The beautiful woman gave it to me before she left. She said someday someone would come asking questions, and I should give this to them. Dr. Sinclair took the object and gasped. It was a small piece of beadwork, identical in style and craftsmanship to the artifact Peter Beardy had found by the frozen pond. The beads seemed to shimmer with their own inner light, and the leather was soft and supple despite its apparent age. She knew I would come, Dr. Sinclair. Sarah nodded solemnly. She knows many things. She said you would help people understand that love is stronger than death, and that some promises are kept forever. As Dr. Sinclair held the beadwork, she felt a warmth spread through her hands that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. For the first time since beginning her investigation, she began to accept that she was dealing with something far beyond the scope of conventional science. The mysterious woman was real, and her power to save children seemed to transcend the normal boundaries of life and death. But Dr. Sinclair was beginning to suspect that her investigation had attracted more attention than she had realized, and that the woman's story was far from over. Sinclair returned to Toronto with more questions than answers, but also with a growing conviction that she was investigating something of profound significance. The beadwork Sarah Muskrat had given her sat on her desk like a tangible link to the impossible, its intricate patterns seeming to shift and shimmer in the lamplight. Robert Chen had been busy during her absence, and his research had uncovered a pattern that stretched back over a century. Spread across the large table in Dr. Sinclair's office were photographs, newspaper clippings, and historical documents that painted a picture of recurring miracles. Professor, look at this, Chen said, pointing to a daguerreotype. The image was faded and scratched, but it clearly showed a Cree woman leading a group of children through what appeared to be a snowstorm. The woman's face, though captured by primitive photography, bore an unmistakable resemblance to the figure in Whitmore's. And this one, Chen continued, indicating a sketch from a Hudson's Bay Company journal dated little. The trader who made this drawing wrote about witnessing a spirit woman rescuing children from a smallpox outbreak. It described her as radiating an otherworldly beauty that seemed to illuminate the darkness around her. Dr. Sinclair studied the documents with growing amazement. The pattern was clear every 20-30 years during times of crisis affecting indigenous children. The mysterious woman appeared. Sometimes it was disease, sometimes harsh weather, sometimes violence from settlers or soldiers. But always she came when children were in mortal danger. Robert, have you found any records of what happened to the children she saved? That's the remarkable thing, Professor. In every case where we have follow-up records, the children survived. They were found safe, often in impossible circumstances, always in perfect health despite their ordeals. Chen pulled out a thick folder filled with testimonies and official reports. Look at this account. From it, a group of Cree children were caught in a prairie fire near what is a Saskatoon. Witnesses reported seeing a woman leading them through the flames, but when the fire passed, there was no trace of her. The children were found 3 days later at a trading post 50 miles away, with no burns or smoke inhalation. Sinclair examined the official report of the Northwest Mounted Police. The investigating officer had written, "The children's account of their rescue defies rational explanation, yet their survival is undeniable. They speak of a woman who protected them from the flames and led them to safety through paths that should not have existed." And here, Chen continued, from 1982, children from a Cree band near Fort Garrett disappeared during a military raid. They were presumed dead until they appeared at a mission school weeks later, claiming a Sky Woman had hidden them in a place where the soldiers could not find them. The evidence was overwhelming, but it raised as many questions as it answered. Sinclair found herself grappling with the implications of what they had discovered. Robert, if we accept that these accounts are accurate, then we're dealing with something that challenges our fundamental understanding of reality. How do we witness to the academic community? Before Chen could answer, there was a knock at the office door. Dr. Sinclair opened it to find Thomas Whitmore, the photographer whose images had started the entire investigation. He looked haggard and anxious, his usual confidence replaced by obvious distress. "Dr. Sinclair, thank God you're here. I need to speak with you urgently." She invited him in, noting the way his hands shook as he set down his camera case. "Mr. Whitmore, what's wrong?" "It's the photographs," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Something's happening to them." Whitmore opened his case and carefully removed the original glass plates from his encounter with the mysterious woman. Dr. Sinclair gasped as he saw them. The images were changed. Where once the woman's figure had been clear and detailed, it was now becoming translucent, as if she were fading away. "When did this start?" Dr. Sinclair asked, examining the plates under a magnifying glass. 3 days ago. At first, I thought it was a problem with the developing chemicals, but it's not affecting any of my other photographs, only the images of her." Chen leaned over to look at the plates. "Professor, this is impossible. Photographic images don't just change on their own." Sinclair's studied the fading images with a mixture of scientific fascination and growing unease. The woman's face, which had been so radiant and clear in the original photographs, was now barely visible, but strangest of all, the children in the images remained perfectly clear and unchanged. "Mr. Whitmore, have you experienced anything else unusual since taking these photographs?" The photographer hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Dreams. Every night since I returned from Saskatchewan, I see her in my dreams, and she's trying to tell me something, but I can't understand what." "What does she look like in these dreams?" "Exactly as she appeared in the photographs, but more real somehow. More present. And she seems sad, as if she's saying goodbye." Dr. Sinclair felt a chill run through her. She thought about the beadwork Sarah Muscat had given her, and the way it seemed to warm at her touch. Everything about this case suggested forces at work beyond conventional understanding. "Mr. Whitmore, I want you to leave the plates with me. I think what's happening to them may be connected to the larger pattern we've discovered." After Whitmore left, Dr. Sinclair and Chen spent the evening reviewing all the evidence they had gathered. The historical pattern was clear, but it seemed to be reaching some kind of conclusion. "Professor," Chen said thoughtfully, "what if the woman's appearances aren't random? What if there's a specific purpose to her interventions, and that purpose is nearing completion?" Dr. Sinclair considered this possibility. "You mean she's been working towards some ultimate goal? Think about it. Every time she appears, she saves children who would otherwise die. But not just any children, indigenous children, specifically Cree children, during times when their culture and people are under threat. The implications of Chen's observation were staggering. Sinclair thought about the historical context of each appearance, the smallpox epidemics that decimated indigenous populations, the military conflicts that displaced entire communities, the residential school system that sought to destroy indigenous culture. She's been preserving something, Sinclair whispered, not just saving individual children, but preserving the future of her people. As if in response to her words, the beadwork on her desk began to glow with a soft, warm light. Sinclair and Chen stared in amazement as the intricate patterns seemed to come alive, shifting and dancing in ways that defied explanation. And in that moment, Dr. Sinclair realized that their investigation had attracted the attention of the very force they were studying. The mysterious woman knew they were seeking to understand her story, and she was preparing to reveal the truth about her century-long mission. But with that revelation would come a choice that would test everything Dr. Sinclair believed about science, faith, and the nature of reality itself. The temperature in Dr. Sinclair's office dropped suddenly, and both she and Chen could see their breath misting in the air. The beadwork on the desk continued to glow, its light growing brighter and more intense. Then, impossibly, the air in the center of the room began to shimmer like heat waves rising from summer pavement. "Professor," Chen whispered, his voice tight with awe and fear, "something's happening." The shimmer coalesced into a familiar figure. The Cree woman from the photographs stood before them, as real and solid as if she had walked through the door. But unlike in the black and white images, they could now see her in full detail. The rich colors of her traditional clothing, the intricate beadwork that seemed to contain its own inner light, and most remarkably, her face. She was beautiful, beyond description, but it was a beauty that transcended the physical. Her dark eyes held the wisdom of ages, and her expression radiated a compassion so profound that Dr. Sinclair felt tears spring to her eyes without understanding why. "Dr. Sinclair," the woman said, her voice carrying the musical cadence of Cree but speaking in perfect English, "you have been seeking to understand my story. The time has come for you to know the truth." Dr. Sinclair found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "Who are you?" "He was once called Nokomi Siskwe, grandmother woman, though I was young when I died. That was in the winter of Sefitenos81, during the great sickness that took so many of our people." The woman moved closer, and Sinclair could feel warmth radiating from her presence, pushing back the supernatural cold that had filled the room. "I had 3 children," she continued, her voice carrying the weight of ancient sorrow, 2 toes and a son. The sickness took them all within a single moon. He prayed to the Creator, begging to join them in the spirit world. But my prayer was answered in a way I did not expect. She gestured, and the air around them filled with images, visions of a Cree village devastated by smallpox, of a young woman kneeling beside 3 small graves, of that same woman walking into a blizzard with tears freezing on her cheek. The Creator heard my grief, but also saw the suffering that was coming for our people. I was given a choice: join my children in the spirit world, or remain between worlds to save other children who would face death in the years to come. And you chose to stay," Sinclair said, understanding flooding through her. "I chose love over rest, duty over peace. For over a century I have walked between the world of the living and the world of spirits, appearing when indigenous killers faced death, leading them to safety when no earthly help could reach them." Chen, who had been silent throughout the encounter, finally found his voice. "But why are you appearing to us now? Why reveal yourself?" The woman turned her luminous gaze to him. "Because my task is nearly complete. The children I have saved over the generations have grown, had children of their own, preserved our culture and our people through the darkest times. The future of the Cree nation is secure." She moved to the window, gazing out at the city lights of Toronto. "The world is changing. There are new dangers for children now, but also new protectors. Others will take up the work I have done. Dr. Sinclair felt a profound sadness at the woman's words. "You're saying goodbye. I am saying that my long vigil is ending. Soon, I will join my own children in the spirit world, and my spirit will finally find rest." The woman turned back to them, and Dr. Sinclair saw that she was beginning to fade, becoming translucent like the photographs in Whitmore's collection. "But before I go, I need you to tell my story, not as a curiosity or a mystery to be solved, but as a testament to the power of love and sacrifice. The children I saved, their descendants, the culture that survived because of their lives, this is my legacy. How can we make people believe?" Dr. Sinclair asked desperately. "How can we convince them that this is real?" The woman smiled, and her expression was radiant with joy and peace. "You don't need to convince them. You need only to tell the truth. Those who are meant to understand will understand. Those who are meant to remember will remember." She reached into her clothing and withdrew a small bundle wrapped in soft leather. "This contains the true record of my journeys, written in the old symbols that few now remember. Give it to the elders of my Mai. They will know what to do with it." Sinclair took said bundle, feeling its warmth and weight. "Will we see you again? You will see me in every child who is saved from danger, in every act of love that conquers death, in every story that preserves the memory of those who came before. I am not ending. I am becoming part of something larger." The woman began to fade more rapidly now, her form becoming as insubstantial as morning mist. "Remember, Dr. Sinclair, some promises are kept beyond death, and love is the strongest force in any world." With those words, she vanished completely, leaving only the lingering scent of sweet grass and the warmth of her presence. The temperature in the room returned to normal, and the beadwork on Dr. Sinclair's desk settled into its normal, beautiful but mundane appearance. Dr. Sinclair and Chen sat in a stunned silence for several minutes, each trying to process what they had witnessed. Finally, Chen spoke. "Professor, what do we do now?" Dr. Sinclair looked at a leather bundle in her hands, then at the fading photographs that documented over a century of miraculous rescues. "We do what she asked. We tell her story." Over the following months, Sinclair worked to document everything they had discovered about the mysterious Cree Woman. She traveled back to Saskatchewan, meeting with elders and sharing the bundle the woman had given her. The reaction was immediate and profound. The symbols contained genealogies and stories that had been thought lost forever, preserving crucial elements of Cree culture and history. She published her findings in academic journals, though she was careful to present them as folklore and oral history rather than supernatural encounters. The response was mixed. Some dismissed her work as unscientific, while others recognized the profound cultural and historical value of what she had preserved. But the most important response came from the indigenous communities themselves. The story of Nokomisisqui, the grandmother woman who had sacrificed her eternal rest to save the children of her people, became a source of strength and pride. It reminded them that their ancestors had made unimaginable sacrifices to ensure their survival, and that their culture had endured through the darkest times because of love and determination. Thomas Whitmore's photographs, though faded, were preserved in the archives of the University of Toronto. Occasionally, visitors would comment on the strange quality of the images, the way the woman seemed to glow with inner light even in the black and white prints. And sometimes, on the coldest winter nights, when snow fell heavy and thick across the Canadian prairies, travelers would report seeing a figure in the distance, a beautiful Cree woman leading children through the storm, her face radiant with love and determination, ensuring that no child would face the darkness alone. The mystery had been solved, but the legend lived on, a testament to the power of love to transcend death itself, and to the promise that some guardians never truly leave us, even when their watch has ended.